At 72, Eleanor Hartwell still believed that loyalty was a debt children repaid, that the three she had raised on a gas station mechanic's wages would never, not in this life, hand her a packed suitcase and call it mercy. She believed it all that gray morning in Knoxville, sitting in a lawyer's office on Gay Street with her good brown handbag in her lap, certain the appointment was about her care. The river fog had not burned off yet. She could see it from the window, hanging low over the water, like the city had not quite decided to wake up. There was a brochure on the table. Glossy, expensive, silver-haired strangers laughing over a jigsaw puzzle, and gold letters across the top. Sunset Meadows, a place for new beginnings. Her oldest, Spencer, slid it toward her the way she had watched men slide papers across a counter her whole life. "We think it's time, Mom," he said. She looked at the brochure, then at her son. "Time for what, honey?" "For you to be somewhere safe, somewhere you don't have to worry about the stairs, the cooking, all of it." His watch caught the light when he moved. "We've handled everything." Across the table, Spencer's wife, Diana, folded her hands. "It's the responsible thing, Eleanor. At your age, rattling around that big house alone. We only want what's best. What's best?" Eleanor had spent 41 years learning that when a certain kind of person said what's best, they meant what was easiest for them. What none of the three of them knew, sitting there in their good coats, was that their father had left their mother exactly one thing they had all laughed off as junk, 2 winters gone and not worth the gas to drive out and see. And in a matter of weeks, that piece of junk would be worth more than the house, the car, and the bank account they had already, quietly, begun to divide. But that part comes later. In Eleanor's handbag, beneath the checkbook and the reading glasses, was a plain manila envelope, soft at the corners from 2 years of handling. Frank had pressed it into her hands the last good week of his life. On the front, in his blocky mechanic's print, 4 words: "Open it when they show you who they are." She had not opened it. For 2 winters, she had carried it and told herself she did not need to. Sitting in that office, with the brochure glowing on the table, she was beginning to understand what he had meant. To understand the envelope, you have to understand Frank. Frank Hartwell had pumped gas and turned wrenches on Magnolia Avenue for 41 years. Hartwell's Service and Fuel, the sign read, out on the east end of Knoxville where the old state route bent toward the county line. 2 pumps, 1 service bay, a Coke machine that ate your quarters every July. It was not much, and Frank never once pretended it was. He raised 3 children on what those 2 pumps brought in: braces for Spencer, piano lessons for Camille, a used Buick for the youngest, Dale, the summer he turned 16, before Dale drove that Buick down to Atlanta and mostly forgot the road home. There were Sunday casseroles every single Sunday, the dish still warm in Eleanor's lap on the ride back from church. There were Christmases the station stayed open past dark because somebody always slid into a ditch on Christmas, and Frank was the only man who would answer the phone. He came home smelling of motor oil and cold air for 41 years. His hands never came fully clean. Eleanor used to tease that she had married a man with permanent grease under his nails, and Frank used to answer that the grease had paid for every plate on their table. He was not wrong. He had a saying about that station, about the corner it sat on, where the old state route met the county road, and the Smokies sat gray and far on the horizon. Whenever money ran thin, whenever a winter stretched long and the pumps ran slow, Frank would look out at that crooked intersection and say the same thing. "The corner always pays last, Ellie." She never knew quite what he meant. She figured it was just something a tired man told himself to keep going. Frank had been gone 2 winters now. He went quiet in his sleep one January night. No fuss. The way he did everything. After the funeral, the station closed for good. The pumps went dry. The windows got boarded over. And the little back office, the room where Frank kept his logbooks and his coffee can of receipts, stayed locked because no one could find the key, and no one but Eleanor seemed to think it mattered. After Frank, Eleanor had grown small in her own house. She kept to 2 rooms. She turned the heat down low to save money she was not even certain was still hers. When Spencer suggested she let the family help manage things, she let them. She signed where they pointed. She had raised her children to be careful with money, and she told herself this was only them being careful. That is the trick of it sometimes. You can raise a child to be careful and then stand back and watch them be careful with you. The family meeting came on a Sunday in March. They gathered in the dining room of the house on Linden Avenue, the house Frank had paid off pump by pump over 30 years. Spencer drove in from Nashville in a German car that had cost more than the house was first worth. Camille Hartwell Voss came with her husband. Dale phoned in on the speaker from Atlanta, his voice tinny and far away, which was about how present he had managed to be for 20 years. Spencer ran the meeting like a closing. He had a folder. He had figures. He talked about his mother's whole life the way he talked about a property he was getting ready to flip. So the house appraises at $280, maybe $290 if we stage it, he said. The Buick's worth, $8,000. The accounts we consolidate into the trust. It just makes sense to simplify everything now while Mom's still able to sign. Eleanor sat at the head of her own table and listened to her son inventory her like a clearance sale. Diana had brought a notepad. We should liquidate the dead weight first, she said, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. The house, the car. Get Eleanor into the right facility before the spring market softens. Sunset Meadows has a wait list, but Spencer knows the director. Eleanor looked at this woman she had welcomed to 19 Thanksgivings. The dead weight, she said. You know what I mean, Diana said. Eleanor did know what she meant. That was the whole trouble. Camille spoke up only once. Mom, it's just, we worry about you out here by yourself. But she said it to her coffee cup, not to her mother. And when Eleanor reached over and laid a hand on her daughter's wrist, Camille drew the wrist back to check her phone. Frank's hands, those were, pulling away. At the end, Spencer flipped to the last page of his folder. There's the old station too, but that's nothing. Boarded up, taxes barely paid, sitting on a dead corner nobody's touched in 20 years. He almost smiled. Honestly, it had cost us money to haul it off. We'll let the county take it. Dale's voice crackled through the speaker. Yeah, right off the station. Frank's little hobby. And they all chuckled, that warm and easy chuckle of people agreeing about something worthless. Eleanor did not chuckle. Under the table, in her lap, her hand found the soft corner of the manila envelope she had taken to carrying everywhere. The corner always pays last. She said nothing. She had learned, across 2 years of growing small, exactly how to say nothing. 2 weeks later, they were back in the lawyer's office on Gay Street, the one with the brochure on the table and the river fog at the window. The lawyer was a soft-handed man named Pruitt, who worked for Spencer and called Eleanor ma'am in a way that did not warm the room. The papers sat in a neat stack. A pen lay across the top, angled toward her like an arrow. It's all just simplifying things, Mom, Spencer said. Power of attorney here. Sale authorization here. This one rolls the joint accounts into the family trust. He tapped each line with one finger. Easier on everybody. Eleanor read every page. She was slow about it, and she could feel them shifting in their chairs, and she read every page anyway. Then she signed. Not because she failed to understand it, because she had decided somewhere on the road between that dining room and this office to let them show her exactly who they were. Frank had told her when to open the envelope. He had not told her to fight in a room full of people who had already made up their minds. She signed Eleanor Hartwell in her steady, old-fashioned hand, and she watched her son let out a breath, the way a man does when he has finally closed a difficult deal. It moved fast after that. The house on Linden Avenue sold in 9 days to a young couple who wanted the yard. The Buick went to a dealer on Clinton Highway. The accounts folded into a trust with Spencer's name on the signature card and Eleanor's name nowhere on it. They let her keep her clothes, her photographs, and a single cardboard box of Frank's things that none of them wanted, and a city bus pass because Sunset Meadows ran a shuttle, and a woman her age, they all agreed, did not need a car.
It wasn't my fault, I
By the
swear.
first week of April, there was a suitcase by the front door. Hers, packed by Diana, who had folded the cardigans into neat squares, which Eleanor supposed was meant to pass for tenderness. The shuttle to Sunset Meadows was coming on a Thursday. Eleanor was dressed a full hour early. Oatmeal cardigan, charcoal skirt, the brown handbag on her shoulder, and the soft manila envelope in her hand. But when the morning came, she did not sit and wait for the shuttle. She walked to the bus stop on Magnolia Avenue and rode the one thing they had left her out to the far east end of Knoxville, out past the auto yards and the shuttered rib joints, out to where two dead pumps stood in the river fog, under a crooked sign, on the corner the whole family had voted, warmly and easily, to forget. She had a key to nothing out there. The back office was still locked tight, but Frank's voice rode the whole way with her, plain as a Sunday morning. The corner always pays last. The station looked smaller than she remembered and older, the way everything does when the man who kept it is gone. The two pumps stood crooked under the canopy, their glass faces clouded, the hoses coiled and cracked like something left out through too many winters. The sign still read, Hartwell's Service and Fuel, though the paint had gone the color of weak tea, and the neon open in the window, the one Frank flipped on every morning at 6, hung at a tired angle and had not glowed in 2 years. Eleanor stood close to the pumps now, near enough to touch them, with her brown handbag on her shoulder and the soft manila envelope in her hand, and she did not feel small there. That was the strange thing. In the house on Linden Avenue, she had shrunk to 2 rooms and a low thermostat. Out here, on a dead corner, her whole family had voted to forget. She felt the size she used to be. The river fog was thinning. Somewhere behind it, the Smokies were coming up gray and patient on the horizon, the way they always did, indifferent to who owned what. She walked the lot slow, past the air hose, past the Coke machine, dark now, that had eaten the children's quarters every July, past the service bay where Frank had spent 41 years bent under other people's troubles. She put her hand flat on the boarded window of the little office and felt the cold come through the plywood, and she thought, this is the only thing of yours they did not take, Frank, and they did not take it because they did not want it. That was when she heard the truck. It came up the old state route slow, an old pickup the color of a rusted tractor, and it turned into the lot like it had turned into that lot 1,000 times, which it had. The man who climbed out was near her own age, maybe past it, with a back that had not been straight since the Carter years, and hands that told the same story Frank's hands had told. Grease worn so deep into the knuckles that no soap on earth would ever lift it. He had 2 paper cups of coffee balanced in one of them. Ms. Hartwell, Earl Dabney said, and touched the brim of a cap that said nothing at all on the front of it. Figured that'd be you. Saw the bus let somebody off, and I said to myself, ain't but one person in this world would get off a bus way out here.
Right here.
Earl.
Right where your hand
Her voice caught on his name. She had not expected to be known. She had spent 2 years not being known. You still come out this way? Every few days. He came across the lot and held out one of the coffees, and she took it, and it was hot, and it was the first thing anybody had handed her in a long while that did not have a pen waiting behind it. Somebody's got to keep the kids from breaking the rest of the windows. And he stopped. He looked at the boarded window where her hand had just been, and it didn't feel right, letting it sit alone. Frank and me ran this corner 41 years. A place gets to where it's owed a little company. Eleanor looked at the old man and felt something behind her ribs that she had been holding shut for a long time start to give. They're putting me in a home, Earl, she said. She had not said it out loud to a single soul. It came out plain, Sunset Meadows. The shuttle's coming this morning. There's a suitcase by a door that isn't mine anymore. Earl did not gasp, and he did not pat her hand, and he did not tell her it was for the best. He just looked at her a while, and then he looked at the station, and then he did a thing that undid her more than any kindness had in 2 years. He reached into his pocket and brought out a ring of keys, old keys, worn bright, with a strip of red electrical tape on the biggest one gone gray at the edges. "Frank gave me these the spring before he passed," Earl said. "Told me to hold on to 'em. Told me there'd come a day somebody would need in and it wouldn't be one of the kids." He worked the taped key off the ring with thick fingers. "I never gave 'em up. That lawyer, that Pruitt fella, he called me one time askin' did I have keys to the property. I told him I was an old man and I'd lost more keys than he had ever owned. He almost smiled. Wasn't even a lie. I have lost a lot of keys, just not these." He held the taped key out to her on his open palm. "This is your husband's station, Ms. Hartwell," he said. "Whatever them papers say downtown, you want in, you go in." She did not take the key right away. She stood there holding her coffee in the thinning fog, and somewhere across the city, a shuttle van with the words Sunset Meadows painted on the side was pulling up to a curb on Linden Avenue, idling at a house that was not hers anymore, beside a suitcase packed by a woman who had folded the cardigans into neat little squares. Let it idle. Eleanor took the key. The taped key turned in the front lock like no time had passed at all. The door swung in on a smell that stopped her in the doorway. Cold concrete and motor oil and old coffee, and underneath all of it, faint as a memory, the bay rag smell of Frank himself. The light came gray through the dusty glass. There was the counter where he rang up gas and gum and night crawlers. There was his stool. There was the calendar on the wall still turned to a January 2 winters gone, a pretty mountain scene above the days he had never finished crossing off. Eleanor set her handbag on the counter, and she set the manila envelope down beside it, careful, the way you put down something that might still be sleeping. Then she stood in the middle of her husband's station and let it be quiet around her. "I'm not going to Sunset Meadows," she said. "No," Earl agreed. "I don't reckon you are." There was an army cot in the storeroom, the one Frank used to unfold on the nights a blizzard kept the wreckers running, and he could not make it home. Earl helped her carry it out and set it up behind the counter, by the little space heater that, against all odds and a thick layer of dust, still kicked on when he plugged it in. He went out to his truck and came back with a sleeping bag and a thermos and a sack of cat head biscuits his neighbor lady made, and he set them on the counter and did not make a thing of it. "You can't sleep in a gas station. A woman your age," he said, in the voice of a man who already knew exactly what she was going to say back. "I raised 3 children and buried a husband, Earl," Eleanor said, smoothing the sleeping bag over the cot. "I expect I can sleep wherever I please." He laughed at that, a real laugh, dry as gravel. It was the first time anyone had laughed near her in a way that was not at something they had decided was worthless. The next morning brought Junie Castellano. She came across the old state route with a plate covered in foil, a girl of maybe 26 in a waitress apron, with a name tag from the diner across the road, the Wheelhouse, that stayed open for truckers and third-shift nurses, and nobody much else. She had seen the light through the station window the night before. People on the east end of Knoxville notice a light that has not been on in 2 years. "You the lady that owns this place?" Junie asked, standing in the doorway, taking in the cot and the space heater, and the old woman in the oatmeal cardigan with plain curiosity and no pity at all. Eleanor considered the question. Downtown, a stack of signed papers said she owned nothing in this world. Out here, she was standing in it. "I believe I might be," she said. "Good." Junie set the plate on the counter and peeled back the foil. Eggs still steaming and grits and 2 pieces of bacon. Because that corner's been dark so long the truckers keep complaining there's nowhere to get air or a cup of coffee between the interstate and the county line. You light those pumps back up, you do a business out here. My granddaddy used to buy his gas off of Mr. Hartwell, said he was the only honest man with a fuel hose in 3 counties. "That was my Frank," Eleanor said, and her voice did the catching thing again. Junie looked at her, and something passed between the young woman and the old one. quick and wordless, the way it does between people who have both learned early that nobody is coming to save them. "Well," Junie said, "eat your eggs, Ms. Hartwell. Cold eggs is a sin." After that they came the way water finds a low place, slow, and then all at once. There was a man named Doyle who had pumped his first tank of gas at Hartwell's at 16 and now drove a wrecker of his own, and he came by with a socket set and had the air hose breathing again in an afternoon. There were the Coley brothers, 2 of them, who climbed up and patched the canopy where it had begun to sag. There was a retired lineman named Cecil, who studied the dead neon in the window a long while, sucked his teeth, and allowed that he believed he could make that open sign glow again if Eleanor would let him take it on down to his shop. She let him take it down to his shop. They did not do it for pay. There was no pay to do it for. They did it because the East End of Knoxville is the kind of place where a man remembers who fixed his daddy's truck on Christmas Eve and would not take a dime for the call. They did it because Frank Hartwell had spent 41 years being owed, quietly, by half the working people on Magnolia Avenue. And now that he was gone, the debt had come looking for somewhere to land, and it found his widow on an army cot behind the counter. And Eleanor worked alongside every one of them. She was 72, and her knees were not what they had been, but she could hold a flashlight steady and read a gauge and tell a man when he had a fitting cross-threaded, because she had spent 41 years married to the work, even when her own hands stayed clean. She did not sit in a corner and let herself be tended. She rolled up the sleeves of that oatmeal cardigan and got grease under her own nails for the first time in her life. And at night she lay on the cot and looked at her hands in the orange glow of the space heater and thought that Frank would have liked them better this way. It was Earl who said the thing that changed it all, and he said it the way he said everything, sideways and without warning, over a thermos cup of coffee on the 3rd or 4th gray morning. They were sitting on the tailgate of his truck, watching the fog come off the river when he set his cup down on his knee and said, "You know they can't sell this. Don't matter what you sign downtown." Eleanor looked at him. "They sold the house, Earl. They sold the car. They closed the accounts. They can do about anything they please. I signed it." "You signed away what was Frank's to put in the pot," Earl said. "The house, the car, whatever sat in the bank, but this corner." He nodded out at the crooked pumps, at the bare socket where the open sign used to hang, at the gray mountains beyond. This corner was never Frank's to lose, Ms. Hartwell, and it sure ain't theirs. Something went very still in Eleanor's chest. "What do you mean? It wasn't Frank's." Earl was quiet a moment, choosing the words. "There's a back office in there, the little room behind the counter that stays locked. Frank kept his logbooks in it, 41 years of them, and a coffee can of receipts and a box, gray metal box about so big, the kind that won't burn." He held his grease-dark hands apart to show her. "He showed me what was in it one time only, the spring he handed me the keys, made me look at it so I'd know. So at least one soul on this earth would know." He turned and looked at her with eyes gone wet at the rims. And then he said, "Earl, when the day comes, you make sure Ellie's the one who opens this. Not the kids. Ellie." The fog moved over the water. Out on the interstate, a truck downshifted, and the sound rolled across the lot like far-off thunder. "I got the key to that room, too," Earl said. "Had it the whole time. I just been waiting on you to be ready to use it." He climbed down off the tailgate, slow, one hand bracing his bad back. "I believe you're ready, Ellie. I believe today is the day Frank meant." The lock on the back office was a stubborn old thing, and the key, with the second strip of tape on it, fought Earl's fingers, but it turned. The door scraped open on a room hardly bigger than a closet, windowless that not one heir to the Hartwell estate had ever set foot in, because not one of them had ever wanted to badly enough to go looking for the key. Inside it smelled of paper and dust and time. The logbooks were there, just as he had said, 41 years of them lined up on a plank shelf in Frank's blocky pencil hand. Every gallon and every credit and every man he had let pay, next week written down. the coffee can of receipts, a church calendar older than the one out front, and on the bottom shelf, pushed back into the dark, a gray metal box about the size of a bread loaf, with a handle gone cool to the touch and a little keyhole of its own. You might think you already know what was inside that box. Hold on to that thought a moment. Earl carried it out and set it on the counter beside Eleanor's brown handbag and the soft manila envelope she still had not opened. Then he stepped back. "That part's yours to do," he said, "not mine." Eleanor's hands were not quite steady. She found the smallest key on the ring, the last one, the one with no tape on it at all, and she fit it to the lock, and she lifted the lid. On top there was an insurance policy gone yellow, and Frank's discharge papers, and a photograph of the two of them in front of the station the year it opened, young and skinny, and laughing at something the camera never caught. She lifted those out with great care and set them aside, and underneath, in a stiff cardboard folder, was a deed. She knew what a deed looked like. She had just signed away a houseful of them downtown, but she had never once laid eyes on this one. It was the deed to the corner lot where Hartwell's service and fuel stood, the land and the building both, recorded and stamped at the county register down on Main Street, and where it named the owner, the grantee, the one soul on earth to whom this piece of ground belonged. It did not say Frank Hartwell. It did not say the Hartwell estate. It did not say the family trust with Spencer's name on the signature card. It said Eleanor Hartwell, her name, hers alone. In the careful clerk's lettering of a recording made years back by a husband who had quietly, without one word to a living soul, put the single thing he believed would someday matter into his wife's hands and into no one else's, and clipped to the back of it, on crisp county letterhead, new and white against all that yellowed paper, was a second sheet addressed to the lawful owner of record. Eleanor's eyes were not what they were. She had to carry it to the gray light of the doorway to make out the words. And when she did, she understood finally all the way down to the floor of herself what Frank had meant every single time he had looked out at that crooked intersection and said the thing she had never once understood. The corner always pays last. The sheet was from the Knox County right-of-way office, and it was addressed in the flat gray language of government to the lawful owner of record, Eleanor Hartwell. It said that the county had carried a plan for some years now to widen the old state route where it crossed Magnolia Avenue, out here on the east end where the trucks came off the interstate and had nowhere good to turn. It said the intersection had been studied and surveyed and drawn onto maps in offices she would never see. It said that the parcel on the northwest corner, the one with a service station standing on it, had been found necessary to the project. It said the county intended to acquire that parcel. It said an appraisal had already been performed. And at the very bottom of the page, beneath all the careful words and stamps, there was a number. I am not going to be the one to say that number out loud. Eleanor herself will say it before this is through to the three people who most need to hear it, and it will land far better in her voice than it ever could in mine. For now, it is enough to tell you that she read it twice in the doorway light, and that the second time she read it, her hand found the door frame and held on. Not because she was weak, because the floor of the whole world had just tilted, slow and quiet, the way a heavy thing tips when it has finally been pushed past its balance, and it had tilted toward her. Earl was watching her from beside the counter. He had seen the box opened, and the deed, and now the white county sheet shaking just a little in her hand, and he did not say, "I told you so," because Earl Dabney was not built that way. There was a county man, he said instead, gentle, like he was setting something down so it would not break. Come around. Oh, it had to be 8-9 years back. Real polite. Suit and a clipboard. Wanted to talk to Frank about the corner, about the road they were going to run through here someday. Frank listened to him the whole way through, poured him a cup of coffee, and walked him back out to his car. Earl almost smiled at the memory. Then Frank come back inside, and he didn't say a word to me about money or roads. He just stood right about where you're standing now, looking out at them pumps, And he said it. The corner always pays last. I thought he was talking nonsense, Ellie. Old man talk. I thought he meant the corner was the last thing on God's earth anybody'd ever pay a nickel for. So did I, Eleanor said softly, every time he said it. For 40 years, he didn't mean it was worth nothing. Earl shook his head slow. He meant it'd be the last thing to pay out. And the biggest. He just had to live long enough, or you did. He looked at the floor a moment. Right after that county fella left, Frank went downtown by himself one afternoon. Didn't tell me where, now I know. He went to the Register of Deeds and he put this whole corner in your name and nobody else's. Quiet as church on a Tuesday. Eleanor stood there in her husband's station and understood finally that the man who had come home every night for 41 years, smelling of motor oil and never once raised his voice, had been thinking about her, about this exact morning, longer than she had ever known. He had seen it coming. He had seen all of it coming. And he had built her a door out of it before he ever shut his eyes for the last time. There was still the manila envelope. It had sat unopened on the counter beside her brown handbag the whole while, soft at the corners from 2 years of her carrying it from drawer to drawer in a house that was no longer hers, afraid of it, the way you are afraid of a thing your husband hands you and tells you to save. She had never broken the seal. She picked it up now. On the front, in Frank's blocky, careful pencil, the same hand that had filled 41 years of logbooks, were the words she had read 100 times and obeyed without understanding. Open it when they show you who they are. Well, Frank, she said very quietly to the dusty gray air of the station, they surely have. She sat down on his stool behind the counter because her knees told her to, and she worked her thumb under the flap, and she drew out a single folded sheet of lined paper. Earl saw what it was, and he set down his coffee, and without a word he stepped out through the front door into the cold to let an old woman read her husband's last words alone. That is the kind of man the East End of Knoxville still grows, here and there, if you know where to look. The letter was not long. Frank had never used 2 words where one would do. Ellie, it began. If somebody has handed you this, then it has happened the way I was afraid it would, and you have seen now what the kids will do when there is money on the table, and I am not standing in front of them. I am sorry I was right. I would rather have been wrong about my own children than right, and I prayed I was wrong. But I have known Spencer since he was 6 and counting other boys' marbles, and I have watched what that wife of his wants out of life, and I made my peace with knowing. So I did the only thing a man like me knows how to do. I fixed it ahead of time, while it was quiet, the way you fix a thing before it breaks instead of after. I left them the house and the car and whatever was sitting in the bank, because those are things, and things are what they understand, and they will tear each other up, dividing them and think they have won. Let them have the things, Ellie. I left them the things. I left you the ground. The corner is yours. It always was on paper, since the day that county man came sniffing around and I figured out what was coming down that road. They will not think to want it because they have never in their lives seen the worth of anything that had a little rust on it. But the road is coming, sweetheart. The road was always coming. And when it comes, the corner pays last, and it pays you, and it pays nobody else. Do not let them make you small. You were never small. You just married a quiet man and stood behind him so long you forgot you were the strong one the whole time. Light the sign back up. Earl will help. Earl knows. I will see you down the road. Take your time getting here. Frank. Eleanor read it through once fast, the way you do when you are afraid of it, and then once slow, the way you do when you have decided to let it have you. And somewhere in the second, reading the thing behind her ribs that she had held shut for 2 years, through the family meeting and the glossy brochure in the suitcase by the door that was packed by her own daughter, that thing finally came loose. She did not wail. She was not a wailing woman. She put the back of one grease-stained hand against her mouth, and she let her shoulders go, there on Frank's stool, in Frank's station, and she cried the way the river fog comes off the Tennessee in the morning, slow and complete and without any sound at all. When she was done, she folded the letter back along its old creases, and she sat up straight, and her face, when she lifted it, was not the face of a woman who had been packed off toward Sunset Meadows. It was the face of a woman who had just been handed back her own name. Cecil the lineman came by that same afternoon with the open sign riding in the bed of his truck, wrapped in a moving blanket like something precious, which it was. He had rebuilt it down at his shop, rewound the dead neon, and cleaned 41 years of grime off the glass. And when he hung it back in the front window on its old chains and plugged it in, it caught with a stutter and a hum, and then it held, glowing a steady warm orange into the gray Knoxville afternoon. Vol orange, Junie called it, standing in the doorway of the wheelhouse across the road with her apron on and her hand over her heart, the first orange light to burn on that corner in 2 winters. A trucker coming off the interstate ramp slowed way down to look at it, and then he tapped his horn twice, friendly, the way you greet something coming back from the dead. Eleanor stood under it and watched it hum and made up her mind. She did not want the money for itself. She wanted them to come. She wanted Spencer Hartwell and Camille Hartwell Voss and Diana to drive out here to the East End they had always been too good for, and walk across the dirt lot in their good shoes, and sit down in the dust of the place their father built, and learn with their own eyes and ears what they had thrown away while they were busy congratulating themselves on the house. She wanted them to look at her while they learned it. That was all. Not the tears, not the begging, not the apologies she knew would never come anyway. Just the looking. So she borrowed the phone from Junie and she dialed her eldest son. And when Spencer picked up, she made her voice small and tired, the voice he expected from her, the voice of the burden he had filed away in his mind underhandled. Spencer, it's your mother. Mom. A pause. The sound of a man checking his watch. Is everything all right? They told me you didn't get on the shuttle. You can't just disappear like that. Do you have any idea the calls I had to make? I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm staying out at your daddy's old station for the time being. She let that sit. I've been thinking. There's the one last thing of his still in my name. This old corner out here. And I know the lawyer wants everything tidied up. I haven't got a car to come downtown. I wondered if you all might drive out, and we'll sign it over. And then it'll be done. All of it. The change in his voice was immediate, and it was the cruelest thing she heard that whole long week, because it was not even angry. It was pleased. It was relieved. Oh, thank God, finally, Spencer said. And she could hear him put his hand over the phone and say something to Diana, and she could hear Diana's voice rise up bright in the background. That station, is she serious? Just sign the rust heap and be done. Yeah, Mom, that's actually really mature of you. I'll be honest, we figured we'd have to drag you through probate over Dad's little hobby out there. Camille kept saying you were attached to it. A short laugh. It's a tax headache more than anything. The thing's basically a liability sitting on contaminated dirt. But sure, we'll come tie it off. Saturday work? Diana's got the kids' thing Sunday. Saturday's fine, Eleanor said. Come in the morning. I'll have something hot for you. You don't have to do that. I know I don't, she said. Bring your sister. She hung up the phone and handed it back to Junie, and the young waitress looked at the old woman's face for a long moment and saw something there that made her grin slow and wide. Ms. Hartwell, Junie said, what did you just do? I invited my children to tea, Eleanor said, and she handed Junie back the phone, and she looked out the window at the orange sign humming over the corner her husband had quietly deeded to her against this very morning. We'd best get the place ready. And Junie, honey, do you know where a body could find a nice teapot out here on the East End? A real one. I want it to be a real one. Saturday came up cold and bright over the Smokies. the kind of clean Knoxville morning that makes the whole valley look washed. Earl swept the lot. Doyle wiped down the old chrome stools until they shone. The Coley brothers carried out a card table, and Junie covered it with a cloth she had brought from the diner. And in the middle of it, against all that history of motor oil and crooked pumps, Eleanor set down a white china teapot with little blue flowers on it, and 4 cups, and a plate of Junie's neighbor lady's cathead biscuits under a clean towel. Eleanor put on the oatmeal cardigan and the charcoal skirt, and she set her brown handbag on the counter behind her, and inside it, folded flat and patient, was the deed and the county sheet with the number on it and Frank's letter. The manila envelope sat squared on the card table beside the teapot, waiting. She'd not yet decided whether her hand would shake when she slid it across. She rather thought it would not. At 9:30, a silver SUV that had never once in its life turned onto Magnolia Avenue slowed at the crooked intersection and signaled and pulled in off the road onto the dirt of the corner that always pays last. The 3 doors of the silver SUV swung open near enough to the same moment, and out onto the cold, bright lot stepped the people Eleanor Hartwell had carried under her own heart and raised up on a mechanic's wages in this same east end of Knoxville. Spencer came first in a soft gray sport coat that had never seen a day of honest work, glancing down at his watch the way certain men do to let a room know how little of their time it is being given. Diana came behind him, setting her heels into the dirt as though the ground out here had personally offended her, a black leather folder pinned under one arm, and last, hanging back at the open car door with her arms folded around herself, though the morning was not so cold as all that, came Camille Hartwell Voss, who had not managed to meet her mother's eyes across the table 2 winters ago, and could not manage it across this lot now either. They came toward the card table the way people walk into a place they have already decided is beneath them, looking at the leaning pumps and the patched roofline and the chrome stools Doyle had shined to a hard gleam, and finding all of it small. Earl Dabney stood off by the office door with his cap in his hands and said not one word. Across Magnolia Avenue, in the lit window of the wheelhouse, Junie Castellano had stopped wiping the same spot on her counter and was watching, and the Coley brothers had found reasons to stand near their truck. Beyond the rooftops, the Smokies sat pale and blue on the far edge of the morning, and the whole East End seemed to have gone quiet and turned one ear toward the corner. Mom. Spencer stopped at the table and looked at the white teapot with its little blue flowers and the plate of biscuits under their clean towel, and something crossed his face that might have been a memory and might only have been impatience. You really didn't have to do all this. We're kind of on a clock. Diana's got the kids' thing tomorrow, so if we could just, knock it out. Sit down, Spencer. Eleanor was already pouring, the steam rising thin and bright off the cups into the cold air. All 3 of you. I made it hot like I said I would. You can give your mother the length of 1 cup of tea before you take the last of him. They sat because there is a thing a mother's voice can still do to grown children even after they have packed her off, and Diana laid her folder on the table and folded her manicured hands on top of it. All business. It's really very simple, Diana said. We had the quitclaim drawn up. You sign, I notarize it right here, it's done today. You don't even have to read it. Our attorney went through every line. She slid the folder an inch toward her mother-in-law with 1 finger. It's just tidying up, Eleanor. Loose ends. I'm sure it is. Eleanor set the pot down. She did not so much as touch the folder. Instead, she reached behind her to the counter where her brown handbag sat, and she drew out the soft manila envelope, worn pale at the corners from 2 years of being carried from drawer to drawer, and she laid it on the cloth between the teapot and her eldest son. But there's a paper of mine you ought to look at before anybody signs anything of yours. Go on, Spencer. You open it. You're the one who always knew what things were worth. You have likely already guessed what was folded inside that envelope. Spencer had not in the slightest, Not until his thumb broke the flap and he drew out the county's stiff white sheet and the recorded deed beneath it. He was a commercial broker down in Nashville. He had read 1,000 of these. His eyes went down the page, the practice board way, skimming, and then they stopped. And then they climbed back up to the top and started again, slow this time, and the color came up out of his collar and drained from his face by degrees. Notice of intended acquisition, right of way, state route widening at the intersection of Magnolia Avenue, appraisal performed, grantee of record, Eleanor Hartwell. And down at the bottom, in the flat gray numerals of the Knox County right-of-way office, the figure. I told you I would not be the one to say that figure aloud. So I will step back now and let her, because it was always hers to say. Eleanor took the sheet gently out of her son's loose hand, and she held it up to the cold morning light the way she had held it in the doorway that first day. And she read the number out to the 3 faces across the table, plain and level, the way you read a hymn number off the board on a Sunday. $1,340,000, Eleanor said. That is what the county has appraised this corner at. For the road they have meant to run through here since before your father passed. She laid the sheet back down on the cloth and smoothed it once with 2 fingers. You called it contaminated dirt, Spencer. On the telephone Tuesday it was. You called it a liability. She looked up. The county calls it $1,340,000. Nobody touched their tea. Out on the interstate ramp, a truck downshifted and came grinding down toward the light, and the relit sign in the window hummed its low orange hum into the silence, and the 3 of them sat in the dust of the place they had laughed off and did the arithmetic. The house, Spencer said, and his voice had gone strange and far off, almost to himself. The house went $290. The car, the accounts. He stopped. He did not finish it because he did not have to. The corner under their good shoes was worth more than everything the 3 of them had carved up and carried off and called the estate, worth all of it put together and then half again on top. It was Diana who recovered first, the way her kind always do. All right. She sat up straighter and put on a smile with nothing behind it. All right, this is actually wonderful, Eleanor. This is a blessing for the whole family. Obviously, it changes the picture. It's an estate asset and a big one, so we just fold it back in and divide it the way we divided everything else. Fair and square. Equal shares, that's only right. She had her pen out already. If you'll just sign the quitclaim, the lawyer can sort the distribution, and everyone's looked after. No. Eleanor said it without any heat at all, the way you say a thing that is simply true. It is not an estate asset, Diana. It never was. Your father put this corner in my name alone the same week a county man came around asking about that road, going on 9 years back now. He drove downtown by himself and signed it over to me and to no one else, and it has stood in my name every single day since, the whole time you were dividing up his house. You never touched it when you split things, because it was never his to lose. And you never once thought to want it because it had rust on it and it sat out here on the East End where you were all too good to drive. So there is nothing to fold back in. There is nothing to divide. There is only my name, on my ground, where your father set it to keep the 3 of you off it. Diana's mouth opened and closed. Camille had begun, very quietly, to cry. And then came the part Eleanor had known was coming since the telephone call, the part she had braced herself for in the dark, because she knew her own children to the bone. Spencer's whole manner changed, softened, warmed, turned toward her like a sunflower swinging round to a light it had ignored for years. "Mom," he said, and he reached across and set his hand near hers on the cloth, not quite touching it. "Mom, listen to me. Forget the quitclaim. It's off the table, tear it up. We've been worried sick about you out here. You know that. Come stay with me and Diana. We've got the whole room over the garage made up. We'll take care of you now. Take care of all of it together. You shouldn't be sleeping on a cot. Let me take care of my own mother." Eleanor looked at the hand near hers for a long moment. Then she lifted her eyes to her son's face, and what was in her own was not anger, and it was not the begging he might once have expected, and it was not even grief anymore. It was only a great and final clearness. 2 winters back, she said, you set a suitcase by the door that your sister had packed with her own hands, and you gave me a glossy little book about a place with the word Meadows in it, and you called that mercy. This morning you drove the whole way out to the corner of Magnolia to take the last thing your father's hands ever built, and you brought a notary stamp along, so it would not eat too much of your day. She turned her teacup a slow quarter on its saucer. I lay awake the better part of last night trying to reckon what I still owed the 3 of you for all of that. And the only thing I came to, the one thing left that you did not already help yourselves to, is the truth. So that is what you will carry home today instead of the corner. You showed me exactly who you were when you believed I had nothing. I am only showing you that I saw it the whole time. Mom, that isn't fair. We were under a lot of... Dad had only just, I am not coming to live over your garage, Spencer. I am not signing your wife's paper. She said it gently, and that was the very worst of it for them, how gently she could do it. Keep the house money, keep the car. I will not chase a one of you through any courthouse for a dime of it. But the ground is mine, and it stays mine. And when the county pays for it, it pays me. And what I do with it after that is no longer the business of this family. She stood up then, and she was not small, and she had not been small in a long while, only quiet, which is a different thing entirely that they had mistaken for the first her whole life. Camille made a small, broken sound, Mama, hardly a word at all, and Eleanor turned and looked at her youngest, her daughter, who had folded the suitcase and never once raised her eyes. When you can sit across a table from me and keep your eyes up off the floor, Camille, Eleanor said, and her voice was not shut, only honest. You know the road out here. The light will be on. It was not forgiveness, handed over warm in a cup. It was a door left off the latch, and that was all of it. And it would have to be enough, and whether her daughter ever walked back through it was a thing for some later winter to settle. Spencer stood too fast, and his chair went over backward into the dirt. Diana was already gathering up her untouched folder, her face gone hard and flat. They walked back across the lot toward the silver SUV, the way they had come, only quicker now, not looking at the pumps, and Camille came last again, and at the car door she stopped and looked back over the dirt at her mother standing under the burning sign, and then she got in. The doors shut. The SUV backed off the corner onto Magnolia Avenue, and it signaled, prim and habitual even now, and it pulled away east toward the interstate, and was gone. For a while, nobody on the corner said anything at all. Then Junie Castellano came out of the wheel house with the coffee pot held up like a flag, calling across the road that the biscuits were going cold, and a body might as well. And Earl set his cap back on his head and came over and righted the fallen chair. And Doyle and the Coley brothers drifted in, and they sat themselves down at the card table in the cold sunshine and drank the rest of the tea that the Blood family had not touched. The chosen ones. The ones who had come out when there was nothing here but rust and a widow. What happened after happened in offices, the way these things do. The following week, a clerk at the Knox County Register of Deeds entered the acquisition into the permanent record against one name and one name only, Eleanor Hartwell, sole grantee, and stamped the date in beside it and slid the book shut. Down the same hall, a probate file that everyone had supposed was long closed drew a yellow flag and a hold on the discovery that an asset had been left clean out of an estate that was quietly divided all around it. And a short and very polite letter went out from that office to a Nashville address, asking Spencer Hartwell to please come in and walk them through the paperwork. The road plans rolled forward. That spring, the survey stakes went into the ground along the old state route, their orange ribbons snapping in the wind, one of them driven at the very lip of the corner, and the name on every notice the county mailed from then on to the lawful owner of record was hers. She kept the station open. She had Cecil wire the pumps so the bell would ring again, and she let the truckers stop for air and water and a cup of Junie's coffee. And over the door, where any tired soul coming off the long interstate hall could see it, the rebuilt sign held its steady orange through the dark. On a morning not long after, before the heat came up off the river, Eleanor walked out across her own dirt in the oatmeal cardigan and stood right where Frank used to stand. Earl was on her right and Junie on her left, and the manila envelope was still in her hand. The sign hummed its orange over the empty road. She stood and watched the first truck of the day come down off the ramp toward her corner.